welcome back to our English first additional language lessons, and we are still on visual literacy. And then on this lesson now we are going to look into how to analyze a cartoon and what is that we need to look out for, if not to study, in order to understand and to interpret a cartoon. Now I want us to start first by understanding the purpose of a cartoon. That a cartoon can be there just to entertain, and normally we call them what humorous cartoon. It means they are just there to pass out what a joke, right? And also a cartoon can be there to inform, or a cartoon can be there to do what? To educate. If a cartoon is there to entertain, meaning that is what we normally label or call a humorous cartoon, it means that as a reader or an analyzer of that cartoon, you should be in a position to tell us how the humor, how the joke was created. And for you to understand how the joke was created, you are going to rely on the storyline. So you are going to rely on the storyline to know what kind of a cartoon are you interpreting, what kind of a cartoon are you analyzing. Are you analyzing to a cartoon that is serious, maybe it talks about the pandemic, or it talks about bullying? That one of course is going to be a very educative or informative cartoon. But then the one that actually is there to pass out a joke, you need to know how humor is created, because the last question normally, which is the higher order question, examiners normally would ask you was or did the cartoonist succeed in creating humor in this cartoon. So you need to justify as to whether yes, humor was created successfully or not, and then unpack the storyline in such a way that you explain how humor is created. And we are going to get into that towards the end of the lesson. Another thing that you need to look out for when you analyze a cartoon, you need to check the setting. This means where action is taking place. So here is going to be a place where action is taking place in a cartoon. You need to analyze whether are the characters in the bedroom, are the characters in a classroom, are the characters out in the field. Although you may come across cartoons with a very clean background, it means that the background is not informing us as to where action is taking place. But once you see other things, no matter how small the details might be in a frame, then you know that actually this is where it will determine where our action is or it taking place in that particular cartoon. And then before we can go to body language, facial expressions and so forth, after establishing the setting, it is also important to study the relationship between the characters. In this cartoon, are we going to read about mom and dad? Are we going to read about husband and wife? The examiners will always give you this to say note. For an example, the cartoon that you are going to do here, it says in this cartoon the man is dark hood and the woman is his wife, Blondie. The word pizza in frame 7 or 8 refers to a meal which is bought from a fast food outlet. So it is important to always read this note from the examiner, because it's going to give you clear instruction as to what is that you should expect with in relation to, or rather with reference to, the relationship between characters in a cartoon. And then now remember that a cartoon is actually a series of frames. Is a series of frames, or sometimes other people call it strips, cartoon strips. Or sometimes you may come across a cartoon with just only one single frame. So for you to understand the storyline, as I've already alluded in the beginning, you need to study all the frames and you need to check out all the frames in order to understand the storyline. Because if you don't understand the storyline, you won't be in a position to determine whether this cartoon was there to entertain or this cartoon was just there to inform or to educate. And then now, in each and every frame, you study all the details. Where you see furniture or you see what a car, it definitely gives you the setting. It means that's the place where action is taking place. Now the question is then, where and how are you going to respond to questions based on an on a cartoon? To answer questions based on a cartoon, you are going to rely solely on body language as well as a facial expression plus the words of the characters. So that means that today we are going to learn on how to analyze, and after analyzing, it means that how do you then respond to question based on a cartoon. So in order to know whether the character is sad, whether the character is happy, whether the character is crying, whether the character is shouting, we rely on body language. We are also going to study facial expression as well as what the words of the character. However, when you answer, you don't answer by saying body language, you don't answer by saying facial expression. You are now going to become specific to say, okay, maybe you may talk about the eyes being wide open, you may talk about the lips being tightly closed. You become specific as to which features of the face you are going to talk about. And then with the body language, again, you don't answer by saying body language. You may talk about the posture. How is the character standing? Maybe he's standing upright. And you must also talk about the movements of the hands. You may talk about maybe the character's shoulders. The character maybe has slouched his shoulders. Those are just what we call in English adjectives. And then adjectives are nothing but what? Describing words. So it means that for you to analyze a cartoon, to analyze the character's facial or body language, you are going to rely on what you call adjectives. Adjectives meaning what? Describing words. It means that you are going to describe what you see. If the eyes are wide open, you say yes. In frame 1, Tom's eyes are wide open to show that he is actually excited or shocked or surprised. Or the mother's mouth is wide open, her forehead is frowned to show that she is shouting. So in essence, what I'm going to teach you today is that the words of the character must match the gestures from body language and facial expression. Ultimately, it will give you what? The mood of the character. If you can't say that the character's mouth is wide open to show that the character is sleeping, that's a contradiction. If the mouth is wide open, we're expecting that character to say the words louder or to say how to actually be shouting. So that means that our answers will be centered around the description of body language. I'm repeating, the description of facial expression. However, you don't answer by saying body language, you don't answer by saying facial expression. You tend to become how? Specific. And then now another aspect that's going to help you to unpack and understand the storyline are the words of the characters. With the words of the characters now in a cartoon, what are we going to look at? We are going to look at the font size. We are going to look at the font size. Remember when we were studying advertisement, we said that the characters will use bolded letters in an advert to show, to grab the reader's attention and to emphasize the message. But now we are dealing with cartoons. If the words are bolded, with exclamation mark or question marks, is to show that the character is shouting or the character is saying the words how? Louder. So when you answer, your answers must not only be rooted on one aspect where only maybe talk about facial expression. Check the face of the character, check the body language of the character, as well as you study what? You study the words of the characters. How are they being printed? Are they in bold? Are they with capital letters? And then that's where now you can qualify your answer to say, indeed, this character is saying these words louder because they are in capital letters, they are bolded with exclamation mark, and the character's mouth is also wide open. So in essence, for you to answer or respond to questions based on a cartoon, we are going to rely on what? On evidence. And where are you going to get your evidence? Body language, facial expression, as well as what? The words of the characters. And now we are going to look into how words are used in a cartoon. You can have what you call a speech bubble, and then you can also have what you call a thought bubble. A speech bubble, it means these are actually the direct words of the speaker himself or herself. Like here we've got a speech bubble to indicate that Blondie is speaking. And then a thought bubble will actually indicate with circles, not a pointy tail, circles to indicate that the character here is not really necessarily talking but thinking out loud. So you should be in a position to differentiate between a speech bubble and a thought bubble. And then what you can also have, sometimes you can also have what you call eject, if not a shouting bubble. A shouting bubble, it will be drawn with edges or eject a bubble like this one, and then it will include the words of the character. This also is to emphasize that the character is doing what? The character is shouting. So remember that for you to answer any question based on a cartoon itself, you need to back it up with evidence. And I've already said at the beginning of the lesson that we get our evidence from body language, description, not only body language, but rather description of body language, as well as facial expression, as well as the words of the characters. And then before you can even study the cartoon, remember a cartoon is a series of frames that which are used to establish a story. It is important now to go to this section of the question paper and thoroughly read as to what is happening here. In this cartoon, the man is Darkwood and the woman is his wife Blondie. And then the word pizza in frame 7 and 8 refers to a meal which is bought from a fast food outlet. So we've got a couple, and then I also see a dog. So we've got how many frames? We've got frame 1 up until frame 8. So now we look into the first frame. When I study the first frame, what I see, they said, the examiner said that Darkwood is the man sleeping. He's even facing the other opposite direction. And here is the dog looking at an opposite direction. But we don't even see where is the dog looking at. But remember what I said earlier on, I spoke about setting. That it is important to study each and every frame because for you to determine where action is taking place. So if you see a couch, we know that this is a TV room or it's in a TV room. And then again, now we go to frame, this is silent, we don't have any speech bubble. We go to frame 2. When I switch to frame 2 now, there's contrast. It means that there is a difference because now the dog was actually seated here. It's starting to move. And then remember, how do I know that the dog is moving? One leg is up. There are also lines above. Even you can see, no matter how small the detail is, everything counts. Ne? And then also it seems as if the nose is raised up. There are lines above the dog's nose. It means that it indicates that this dog could smell something. Hence the reaction from frame 1 where it was seated, and then now it is starting to move. It is because there's a reason why the dog is starting to move. It smelled or could sense something because the nose is even up. There are even lines above the nose. However, Darkwood is still in the same position as you can see from frame 1. He's still sleeping. We even have Z bolded here to indicate that Darkwood is actually doing what? He's actually sleeping. Alright, now in frame 3, we only see the dog. We don't see Darkwood. But also let us check the action of the dog. The dog is actually barking because the word ARF, they are bolded. This is how you answer. You mentioned that the words there are how? They are bolded to indicate that the dog is doing what? The dog is barking, and you can also see that it's actually scratching the door, and then it's also, its mouth is wide open. The mouth is wide open. That's how you analyze a cartoon. The mouth is wide open and it's facing the direction as if like it wants to do what? It wants to wake who? Darkwood up. And then again, we move to frame 4. The action of the dog seems to be now intensifying. We go to frame 4 now. Even the dog has lifted its head. The dog has lifted its head or face. Sorry, pardon me. Its face. The space is small here. And then again, look at the words, how they are written. Bolded with lines. Bolded with lines to indicate that it's barking how? Not only is it barking, but it is barking how? Loudly so. Right? And it is still standing where? At the door. Now, in frame 5 now, look at Darkwood. Darkwood has been the same, in the same posture, same position from frame 1 to end frame 5. However, now the dog seems to be a bit aggressive. The words rough, they are bolded with exclamation mark To further indicate how loud the dog is barking, look at the lines behind the dog's tail to indicate what the lines here indicate speed. You see, each and everything in a frame is quite important. The lines here will indicate what? They will indicate speed, that is running towards where? Is running towards where? Duckwood. But look at Duckwood. Duckwood is still sleeping the same way that he was just sleeping in frame 1 with still Z to indicate that he's actually doing what? Sleeping. And now frame 6, look at those speed lines. This is what we refer to speed lines. And check the word grrr. It's also bolded again to show now the dog is a bit aggressive, trying to wake Duckwood up. You know, it's even clenching its teeth. When you can look closer, it's clenching its teeth, and there are lines behind to show the speed at which it was rushing to Duckwood to wake Duckwood up. And now we see also the reaction from Duckwood. Duckwood's mouth is wide open to show that now he's awake, and then the eye seems to be popping up. And then we go to frame 7 now. In frame 7, we see a new character that we have not seen thus far, and then that character is Blondie. Blondie is saying, "Wow, I don't even have to open the door. How did you know that I was going to surprise you with a pizza for dinner tonight?" That's Blondie asking Duckwood. And now let us look at Duckwood. You must be able to see how characters change in each and every frame. Duckwood's mouth is wide open because he is indulging in pizza. He says, "I have my own personal incoming." Let us use a highlighter. He says, "I've got my own personal incoming pizza warning system." Right? And then a Blondie saying what? Apparently. Now, if you study the storyline, if I were to summarize the storyline in totality, what's basically happening here was that Duckwood was asleep in frame 1. In frame 2, the dog started to move because it could sense something, and we have evidence to support that. There are lines above the nose to show that it was sensing something, and it's starting to move. Even the one leg is lifted up. And then now in frame 3, it's even barking with the word IRF bolded and the mouth wide open, and it's also scratching the door. Can you see how am I unpacking this? This is how you respond. You always respond using evidence, okay? And now in frame 4, it's even getting worse. The dog's face is lifted up. The words again are still bolded. And then in frame 5 again, the dog is trying by all means to wake up Duckwood with the word rough bolded with the use of exclamation mark. That's how you respond. You tell us that, okay, fine, the words rough are bolded with the use of exclamation mark. The dog is also it's lifted its tail, even lifted its tail to show that it's rushing towards Duckwood, who's still asleep, by the way. And now in frame 6, we started to see action from Duckwood, since when there are lines behind the dog to show that the dog was speeding, as well as the dog has clenched its teeth to show how aggressive it wanted to wake up Duckwood. And finally, we see Duckwood's mouth wide open, and he has lifted his head from the pillow to show that now he is awake. And then only to find that Blondie thought that she was going to surprise Duckwood with a pizza, only to find that he said, "How did you know that I'm going to surprise you with pizza tonight?" And then in the last frame he said, "I've got my own personal incoming pizza warning system." In essence, what is that personal incoming pizza warning system? It is the dog, because it's the dog that actually sense that someone, or it could sense that maybe food, or it could smell pizza from afar, hence it woke Duckwood. It takes us back to what we said earlier on at the beginning of our lesson, that after establishing and reading the storyline, you should be able to note that actually this is what we call a humorous cartoon, because it is just there to pass out a joke, and you should be in a position to explain how is the joke created. And for you to explain how the joke is created in this cartoon, you are going to now use the entire storyline, exactly like I have just unpacked that storyline. And now we are going to look into the questions and see, once you have followed everything that I've or the approach that I've just shown you here to study each and every frame, match the emotions of the character with the words as well as facial and body language. You should be in a position now to actually ace all the questions and get 10 out of 10 with questions based on how to analyze a cartoon. Now let us go to the questions. Now the first question says, why has the cartoonist included Z, the symbol Z, in frame 2? And then we have already answered it when we were unpacking it, to say that is to indicate that the dark code is actually doing what? That the dark code is how? Sleeping. So can you see that from the analysis? You can see that from the analysis itself, we are going to directly get the answers from our own analysis that we have just done. Now refer to frame 3 and 5. Please, question interpretation in English is important. When the examiner say refer to a particular frame, go directly to those frames, because that is where you are going to deduce your answers. Explain how the dog's actions convey what? Excitement. Now remember, here we said why we want evidence, and already we have mentioned that in frame 3 that it started to bark using the word ARF in capital letters, is even scratching the door. In frame 4, the dog's face is lifted up with a wide opened mouth, and the words yo, it shows they are bolded again to show that the dog is barking. And then in frame 5, the dog's tail is lifted to show that it's rushing towards Darkwood. Again, the word rough are bolded with exclamation mark. That is the evidence that you can use to show how that the dog to convey the dog's what? Excitement. So we are not only going to look at the words. You say, okay, in frame 3, the dog is scratching the door. Now when you say is scratching the door, you are talking about its action, right? Body language. What about the words? You go to the words. You are not only going to talk about one thing. You go to the words and you say, and the words, right? You can quote those backing words. AR, you can talk about that, right? And then you can also talk about rough are bolded with exclamation mark. And in frame 5, the dog's tail is lifted up to show that it's running. So can you see that we've got rich evidence across the 3 frames to actually indicate to us that the dog is how excited. So when you answer, please ensure that your answer is not only talking about that the dog is barking. How do we know that it's barking? Give us evidence to say the words are bolded with exclamation mark. And then once you've spoken about the words, now speak about what? The action, body language, and that is how you'll be able to collect your 2 marks here. Okay, right. Now 4.3, describe how Darkwood's action in frame 7 are in contrast to his action in frame 6. Learners, if the examiner talks about contrast, he or she's actually looking for difference. In your answer, I should be able to note the difference. Now this question carries 2 marks. So if you want contrast, you want difference, I'm going to go back to what I've said earlier. You can't only talk about the body language or blah. Talk about the words. If there are no words, describe the body language. Okay, now let us look into the frames that are actually in this question. We are going to look into frame 7 as well as frame 6. Now when I look into frame 6, remember we are looking for contrast in the actions, not words. In the actions of Darkwood. Now for you to be able to show contrast, don't talk about the different features. If you are talking about the mouth here, if you are talking about the mouth in frame 6, tell us how is the mouth in frame 7. That is the simplest contrast that you can give us. The mouth in frame 6 is wide open and the mouth in frame 7 is actually closed. That is the contrast, because we can see it is vividly clear that his mouth here is wide open because he was irritated to be woken so rudely by the dog. And then here the mouth was actually the lips were tightly closed to just show that she was actually surprised to see Blondie. And then here you can, now that you have spoken about one feature, remember this is 2 marks, we can't only talk about the mouth. You can go now into the body language, that now here even the eyes are wide open, and then here the eyes seem to be closed here, and then in frame 6, whereas his eyes are wide open in frame 7. And in frame 6, he was just lying on a couch trying to wake up from the barkings of the dog, whereas in frame 7 he is standing upright. So you can see what I've done. I've used the same feature to say the eyes are closed where in frame 6, and then the contrast that I will show is that in frame 7 the eyes are opened, or wide open for that matter, right? Even the mouth is closed where in frame 6, and then the contrast, it will be that in frame, the mouth is opened, opened, wide opened for that matter, and then here in frame 7 we can see that the mouth is closed. So that is how you will be able to do what, to show contrast. And always check mark allocation. If it's 2 marks, you can't talk only about one thing, but if it's 2 marks, and then sometimes maybe if you are not limited to only talk about actions, you can also couple this kind of a response with, and in frame 7 he said blah, in frame 6 he also said 1 2 3. But remember, in this one the examiner was not looking for words or verbal clues, but he was actually looking for action, where the answer is sorted into in actions. So I hope you now understand how to respond to this question. Now I want us to look into the following up question. Let us expatiate so that you'll be able to see. Right, now refer to frame 7. Rewrite the following question as a statement. Now this is a language question. Now this is quite interesting because this is a language question. It says that you must refer to frame 7, the words, how did you know I was going to surprise you with a pizza for dinner tonight? So this is a question, we have to turn it into a statement. So it's going to be, I am going to surprise you with a pizza tonight. The statement will be, I am. It's no longer a question, because once you say how, it's a question. So we are converting rather a question into a statement. I am. Can you see that I'm not adding or changing the meaning of the statement? I am going to surprise you with pizza tonight. Then it becomes what? A statement, is no longer a question. Okay, and then provide a synonym for the word dinner. What do you mean by synonym? Let us come here. Words that mean the same, comma, but written how differently. Okay, for an example, if I don't want to say you are smart, I can say you are intelligent. If I don't want to say someone is neat or the place is neat, I can say the place is clean. This is what we mean by what? Synonym. Words that mean the same but they are written how? Differently. And of course, if I don't want to say dinner, what I can say is what? Supper. Then we collect your mark. Now, what is Darkwood referring to when he says my own personal incoming pizza warning system? This one is simple. We know that the dog is the one that sensed that something is or someone is coming, hence it aggressively woke him up. Now let us just erase quickly before I end this lesson. I'm going to speak about higher order questions. You know that I always emphasize a lot on higher order questions. Higher order questions are very, very important. We need to look into question 4.6. I've said that once you understand the storyline, you will be in a position to answer this higher order question. Now it says, Do you think the cartoonists succeed in conveying humor? 2 marks. And they will say substantiate. It means that you answer in full. What are we going to use? We are going to use the storyline. We are going to use the storyline to justify as to whether humor was created or not. And then, of course, this response, you may craft it, if not fashion it or construct it differently, for as long as you have used storyline with what? With evidence to justify whether the cartoonist managed to create humor. You can say, for an example, from frame 1 to frame 5, Darkwood was asleep. The cartoonist even used the letter Z to indicate that Darkwood is sleeping. However, the dog could sense that someone is coming. It started to move and to bark. For an example, you can say from frame 3 to frame 5, it was barking with the words using exclamation mark to indicate that it was barking loudly. It was even scratching the door, for that matter, to indicate that it could sense that someone is coming. And then even in frame 6, there are lines behind the dog to show that it was aggressively trying to wake Darkwood up. And then in frame 7, now Darkwood was up to open the door for Blondie, who was shocked because she thought she's going to surprise him. And then in the last frame, Darkwood seems to be happy, enjoying or indulging in pizza, and he says that when Blondie asks, how did you know that I'm going to surprise you? He says that I've got my own personal incoming pizza system. Actually, he was referring to the dog. That is why even Blondie replied by saying what? Apparently. So in essence, you use this entire storyline to unpack it and justify as to how humor was created. Now, to quickly round it off, you rely on body language, you rely on facial expression, you rely on the words of the character, and every emotion that you state or everything that you state, you support it with evidence. And where are you going to get your evidence? Description of body language, facial expression, and then plus what? Plus the words of the characters, especially if they are doing what? Bolded, exclamation mark. And then mostly the last question is the higher order question. What are you going to use? You rely on the storyline. That's how you collect your 10 out of 10 in a cartoon. Thank you so much. I hope the lesson was quite fruitful to all of you. See you next time.